Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is all about my Shop Hush collection. I've been promising to do this for a while and I just haven't gotten around to it with all the new releases coming out. But I just wanted to quickly go through and kind of show you what my favorite palettes are and just all the palettes that I have in general and some thoughts on them. So let's get started. All right, so I guess I'll just go kind of in order of how they're laid out. So first I have the Vice palette from Face Candy, and this is actually supposed to be a dupe for the Kylie Purple palette. I don't have that one in my collection, so I don't have it to show you next to this, but what I'll do is just put up a quick screenshot showing them side by side so you can see the difference, and then I'll also post some swatches that I did on Instagram so you can see what it swatches like. It's just a really pretty fun palette. And I would say that Face Candy's formula is very similar to Bad Habit in that the shimmer shades are very buttery and soft. They're maybe a little more powdery on the Face Candy side than they are on Bad Habit. The mattes are also extremely creamy and soft, but just a little bit more on the powdery side. So they are pretty pigmented, but you do sometimes have to build them up and work with them just a little bit. So I do prefer Bad Habit's formula to Face Candy. But like I said, they're similar in that they're very, very soft and easy to blend. Good for beginners, I would say. And then next up we have the After palettes, and these are dupes for the Huda Beauty Obsessions collection. So there's After Dark, After Hours, After Party, After Shock, and then there's two more that are actually still in the box that they sent to me recently that I haven't had a chance to even open yet. So let's go ahead and just look at these side by side with the Huda ones. All right, so as you can see, the Bad Habit ones are a lot bigger than the Huda ones, but this is pretty much a spot-on shade for shade dupe, and I did swatch them together on my Instagram page, so I'll insert swatches of those right now so you can see what they look like side by side. I think they're incredibly similar, and this is probably one of Bad Habit's best formulas to date. I don't think it's really any different than the Huda one. I almost prefer it in some cases, so it's an amazing, amazing formula. And then here we have After Hours, which is supposed to dupe the Huda Mauve Obsessions. So I'll show you the swatches of those side by side as well. This is just a beautiful palette overall, and I really enjoy those mauve-y rosy tones. All right, and then here we have After Party next to the Huda Smoky Obsessions. Again, this is probably my favorite of the Obsessions palettes, and same thing with the After collection. It's just really full of like neutrals and easy to wear shades. So here's the comparison. I'll pop that up on the screen for you so you can see the two. I think I wear this one the most out of all of them for sure. Again, there's really no difference between the two. It's absolutely beautiful. And then here's a look at Aftershock, and I haven't actually swatched this one yet. These aren't really my colors, but I bought them in a bundle, so I got this one as well. I don't own the Huda Obsessions version of this either, so I don't have it to compare it to, but I just wanted to show this to you anyway because it's really, really pretty if you love bright colors. All right, and then here is the Afterglow palette, and this is a dupe for the Huda Coral Obsessions, which I've had for a while, but this one is brand new, so I haven't even had the chance to dip into it yet, so I don't have comparison swatches, but it looks to be an exact shade for shade dupe just like the other ones. And then here's the After Charge palette, and this is supposed to be a dupe for the Gemstone Obsessions palette. Again, I don't have swatches because I just opened this one up, but they look to be pretty much identical. I think the only thing I would say is Bad Habit sometimes changes the order of the shades in the palette, so it can throw you off a little bit, but they're definitely all the same shades in there. All right, and then next up we have the Face Candy Atlantis palette, and this is like an all blue and turquoise and green palette. It looks very, very similar to the palette that Tarte actually had teased on their Instagram page on April Fool's, and it was called Icy Betch, and everybody actually loved it and was hoping that Tarte would come out with that palette, but they never did, so there was a lot of backlash. So Face Candy decided to go ahead and run with that idea because there was a lot of hype around it. So this one looks very similar to that. I'm going to go ahead and put swatches up on the screen that I did. It's just a really, really super pretty palette if you love those oceany blues. Next up is the Face Candy Smoothie palette, and this is an exact dupe for the Too Faced White Peach palette. I actually do have a comparison of these two that I did on my Instagram, so I'm going to show those right now. Again, I do think Too Faced has a superior formula than the Face Candy, which is a little bit more on the powdery side, but obviously this one is way more affordable, especially if you don't think you're going to use these shades all the time, but you want to play with it a little bit. It's a good option just to save some money. But if you love these kind of pastel-y colors like this, I highly recommend buying the Too Faced one because the formula is way better. And then next up is the Milkshake palette from Face Candy. And this one is an exact dupe for the Too Faced Just Peachy mattes. So you can see them side by side here, and I'll also put up swatches. You can see them side by side. And again, the Face Candy swatches really, really well. But when you're applying it to your eyes, I still think that Too Faced has a more superior formula. It's a little bit more pigmented and easy to work with. The powderiness of the Face Candy sometimes makes it hard to stick to your eyelids, and you kind of have to work with it a little bit. But other than that, color-wise, they are pretty much exact dupes. And then next we have the Pretty Poison palette, and I just did a whole video on this one. This is actually the only palette I think in this entire collection that is an original that Bad Habit did recently. It's not a dupe for anything, and it's a really beautiful purple palette, so I'll link that video above in case you missed it. Next is the Fantasia palette, and this one is supposed to be a dupe for the Natasha Denona Tropic palette, I think it was called. I don't own that one. And what I remember about this one is that I wasn't too crazy about the formula. I felt like the shimmer shades were too chunky and not as pigmented as other Bad Habit releases. I think this one actually really disappointed me, so I probably would not put this one on my recommended list. And then next up we have Supernova, and this one is an exact dupe for the Natasha Denona Lila palette. And I have not swatched these side by side, but just looking at the shades, I can tell that it's pretty much an exact dupe. So I can still show you the swatches that I did of this palette on its own. I did them before I had the Lila palette, so that's why I don't have the comparisons, and I really didn't have time to do them this week. But if you want to see more in-depth comparisons on these, definitely let me know, and I can maybe do a video on the Natasha Denona dupes. Next up is the Solstice palette, and this one is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. I just got the Natasha Denona one recently during the Sephora sale, so I haven't even touched it yet. But I will put up swatches of the Solstice palette, which I did swatch on my Instagram way back when I first got it. And I really do think that these Natasha Denona dupes are some of the best Bad Habit palettes, so I highly recommend them. The formula is absolutely incredible. And then I also have the Divine palette from Bad Habit, and this one is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Star palette. And I actually do have comparison swatches of these. Let me just grab this one. It's only going to fit this way. As you can see, they are very, very close, and I'm going to go ahead and put swatches up on the screen so you can see the two side by side, and they are pretty much identical. And I would say formula-wise, the Natasha Denona is superior. The mattes and the shimmers are just the slightest bit creamier and more pigmented. But for the prices that the Natasha Denona shadows are, I don't think it's worth it, because this is not a bad palette by any means. If you don't want to pay the Natasha Denona prices, this is a great way to get pretty much the exact same looks without the huge price tag. All right, so next is the Athena palette from Bad Habit, and this one, oh my gosh, what happened to it? It broke, oh my goodness. Okay, I didn't even realize that, but it's an exact dupe for the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette, and I do have swatches of these side by side, so I'll put them up on the screen right now so that you can see. I think that the Huda Beauty dupes are also some of Bad Habit's best, so I highly recommend these as well, even though the formula seems to be a little bit on the softer side, so you definitely need to be careful with these, but they are incredibly pigmented and the formula is amazing. I also have the Aphrodite palette from Bad Habit, and this one is a dupe for the Huda Beauty Rose Gold. I don't have them swatched side by side because I just got the Rose Gold recently when it re-released, but they look to be almost identical. The only thing is they did change the Rose Gold a little bit from what it was before, so I don't know that they're exact dupes, but they're going to be really, really close. And again, the Bad Habit formula is amazing. All right, so going into row number 2, this is the Artistry palette from Bad Habit, and this is an exact dupe for the Makeup by Mario palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills. This is discontinued now, so the Artistry palette is a great way to get the exact same shades for less money, and I think that the formula is almost as good as Anastasia. It is extremely close, so I would not hesitate to grab this one if you've been wanting the Mario palette but you can't find it. I'll put up some swatches side by side so you can see how close they really are. I think the formula is fantastic on this one. Highly recommend picking this one up. It's one of my favorites. Next up is the Inferno palette, and this one is a shade for shade dupe of the Naked Heat. I don't have the Naked Heat palette anymore. I gave it away, so I'm not able to show you a side-by-side comparison, but I will show you the swatches that I did of this for my Instagram page so you can see what it looks like. And just comparing the two side-by-side in photos, they look to be identical. And just knowing that Bad Habit has exact spot-on dupes, I'm positive that it's pretty much the exact same thing. And then next up is the Face Candy Sahara palette, and I really, really love this one. This one and the next one I'm going to show you are my favorites from Face Candy. And these are supposed to dupe the holiday palettes from Kylie Cosmetics from 2017. So this one was the nice palette, and I'm going to go ahead and put up some swatches on the screen so you can see what this looked like. I don't own the Kylie palettes, but at least you can see what this looks like swatched, and it's absolutely stunning. And then here was the other one. These actually come together in a bundle on Shop Hush, or you can buy them separately. But if you buy the bundle, it saves you a little bit of money. This one is gorgeous as well. It has a lot of cool tones in here, as well as a few warm tones. Just beautiful. And like I said, these are my favorite of the Face Candy palettes, I think, because they're a little more unique. Next up is the Aura palette. I got this one a little bit more recently, so I don't have comparison swatches for you, but it's supposed to dupe the Prism palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills, and as you can see, it's an exact shade for shade dupe. So based on my experience with other Bad Habit palettes, I'm sure it is amazing quality and very similar to the actual Prism palette. And then next is Retro Love, and this one dupes the Subculture palette, and as you can see, this one looks a little bit more loved than my actual Subculture palette. I wasn't crazy about the formula, and I actually prefer the Retro Love formula a little bit more because it's not quite as powdery. There isn't as much fallout and kick-ups. So if you like the colors in the Subculture, but you were worried about the formula, go for the Retro Love because it's pretty much the exact same thing. Next up, we have Luna, and I did a whole video on this one as well. It's an exact dupe for the Norvina palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills, and again, I think the formula is extremely similar. I'll put up some comparison swatches so that you can see what they look like swatched. I really don't think there's a huge difference in the swatches at all, and as I've said before, I think that the Anastasia formula might be slightly more pigmented, but the Bad Habit shimmers I feel like aren't quite as chunky and powdery as the Anastasia ones. They hold together a lot better. So I do prefer the Luna palette, and I reach for it more than I do Norvina. Next up is Arabesque, and this one is a shade for shade dupe for the Soft Glam from Anastasia Beverly Hills. Again, I will show you some comparison swatches that I did, and everything that I've said about these two formulas together still applies here. The Arabesque palette is amazing. I reach for it more than I do Soft Glam sometimes, just because I feel like it's slightly easier to work with and not quite as powdery, not quite as much fallout. So it's absolutely beautiful. Next up, we have the Royals palette, and this one was supposed to dupe the Modern Renaissance. And the reason that this one looks largely untouched, I didn't really enjoy the formula of this one. Now, color-wise, they're exact dupes, but the Royals palette was a little bit disappointing, and this was, I believe, Bad Habit's first palette that they came out with, so maybe they were still working out the kinks in the formula. I do think that it's gotten a lot better over time, for the most part, with the exception of maybe the Fantasia palette, which I wasn't too impressed with, but otherwise, I think that this one just wasn't that great. The shadows were a little bit hard to pick up and weren't as pigmented as the Modern Renaissance, so I don't really recommend this one. And then next is the Beauty Creations Tease Me palette, and this one is actually a pretty close dupe for the new Huda Beauty New Nudes palette. It's not exact, but I did swatch them side by side in my video that I did on the Huda New Nudes palette, and I'll put those swatches up on the screen so you can see them side by side. They are incredibly similar overall, and while this I think is a really nice palette, it lacks the originality in some of these Pearl Eyes shades that the Huda palette has. So while this does have a good formula, if you're looking for like those super rich, creamy, metallic-y shades, the Huda one is probably a better option. But if you love these colors and don't want to spend the money, this is by no means a bad palette. It's actually really, really nice formula, and I enjoy it. All right, so these last 5 palettes I just literally got from Shop Hush not too long ago in PR, so I haven't opened them yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and just open the boxes for you and show them to you, but I can't really comment too much on the formula because I haven't tried them. So first up is the Cult Mythos formula, and this is supposed to be a dupe for one of the Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes. I'm not exactly sure which one, but if you're a Pat McGrath fan, I'm sure you know which one it's duping. They're all available at Sephora. I don't own any Pat McGrath palettes. I hear that they're amazing, so I really don't know how the Bad Habit formula holds up to them, but I'm hoping that it's pretty good. These are actually more on the expensive side for Bad Habit. They're, I think, in the $24 to $26 range because the formula is supposed to be even better than their others, but like I said, I haven't really tried it yet, so I'm not sure. Next up is the Mystere or Mystery. I'm not quite sure how you say that. This one I did swatch briefly, and I do think it did swatch really well. The shimmer shades are incredibly creamy, so I have high hopes for this one. But not having played with it on my eyes, I don't want to like give you too much of an opinion, but it swatches really well, let's put it that way. And then the last Pat McGrath dupe is the Cult Mystics palette. I've also swatched this one. So again, let me just swatch one of the mattes for you so that you can see what that looks like. I mean, it definitely is very soft and seems very blendable. Here's one of the shimmer shades right here. So again, like there's a little bit of like fallout to it and a little bit of chunkiness, but overall very buttery and very smooth. And then next up we have the Bad Habit Dream State palette. This one is all pressed glitters. I haven't tried it yet, but I believe it's supposed to be a dupe for an Urban Decay palette that came out a while back. I can't remember off the top of my head, but again, I haven't played with this yet, so I'm not quite sure what the formula is like. Let me just dip into a shade here and see if I can just do a couple swatches. I mean, yeah, it's definitely like a pressed glitter. It's not as held together as a regular shimmer shade would be. It's a little bit more on the chunkier side, so I'm guessing you're probably just supposed to kind of pat these on your lid, maybe on top of like a glitter glue or a tacky base. But if you love glitter eyeshadows, I think this is a really pretty color scheme. There's warm tones and cool tones and some colors and some neutrals. So overall, I think it's a really pretty palette. And then last but not least is the Face Candy Disco Fever palette. This is supposed to be an exact dupe for the Too Faced Chocolate Gold, which if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that this is one of my absolute favorite palettes. I think it's Too Faced's best formula they've ever done. So I can't see how Face Candy is going to completely match it. But again, like I said, with some of the other Face Candy palettes, I think they're worth it if you don't want to spend the money on the original, if you don't think it's something you're going to use all the time. Spend less money, and that way you can just play with these colors without too much of a commitment. But if you really love the shades in here, then I say go with the original. It's definitely going to be better. But again, I don't think Face Candy shadows are bad, but they're a little bit more on the powdery side, not quite as pigmented as Too Faced, but definitely worth picking up. And I do think that they're better than most of the palettes at the drugstore. So again, they're not a bad palette. I just don't think they're exactly as good as the high-end version. All right, guys, so that is my Shop Hush collection. And I think if I had to choose my favorites, I would recommend for sure the Huda Beauty Obsessions dupes, the Huda Aphrodite and Athena. The Natasha Denona dupes, with the exception of Fantasia, are absolutely amazing. Also, the Artistry palette is fantastic. The Inferno palette has a great formula. They're face candy, so I don't like the formula as much as Bad Habit, but I love these color schemes. So that's one reason that I would definitely recommend these. Again, they're not terrible palettes by any means, but I just think that Bad Habit's formula is slightly superior. The Retro Love palette is a great alternative to Subculture. I would also recommend the Luna and the Arabesque. I think they're awesome. I would say skip the Royals palette for sure. The Tease Me palette is great if you don't want to spend the money on the Huda. These I can't really recommend or not recommend because I haven't tried them yet, but overall I think you can't go wrong with most of these. So if there's something that appeals to you, I definitely wouldn't hesitate to pick them up. All right, guys, that completes this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button. Also, don't forget to go ahead and use my code for the Black Friday sale if it's still going on when you're watching this video. If not, hopefully I have another code that I've inserted below because I regularly have a 10% off code for their website. So once Black Friday is over, I'll go ahead and put just my regular code below so that you can at least save a little bit of money. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.